Hey guys, so we're going to be taking a look at the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is part of the central nervous system and it is an extension of the brain and the brainstem. Okay, so the spinal cord extends from the brain and the brainstem, and this is it. All right. So it is also important to note that the spinal cord plays key function in sending and receiving information from the brain to other parts of the body and vice versa. Okay. So basically, the informations that are sent out from the spinal cord are called are sent out through the motor nerves. Okay, so the information sent out from the brain to other parts of the body is referred to as the motor nerve. So they move out of the spinal cord. So the information processed in the brain moves down, gets to the motor nerves, and moves to different parts of the body. Now, what do they go to the different parts of the body to do? Since they are motor nerves, they tell the body to perform certain functions. For example, the information sent from the brain can be going to glands to tell them to release hormone. It can be going to muscles to tell them to carry out specific functions. Okay, so it is important to note that the motor nerves leaves the information that leaves the brain leaves through the motor nerves. Okay, now we also have the one that enters the spinal cord, and that is what we call the sensory nerve. So that one moves this way. Okay, so you have one information entering the spinal cord and you have another going out of the spinal cord. So the sensory information enters, so let's say sensory, it enters the spinal cord. Meanwhile, the motor information enters the body from the spinal cord. Okay, so that is that. So you have a bond of muscle here that both sends out and receive information, and you have them at both sides. Okay, you have them at opposite sides. All right, so that is that. Now, looking at the different segments of the spinal cord, sorry, it is short here because of the size of the board. Looking at the different segments of the spinal cord now, the spinal cord is actually divided into 31 spinal nerves. Okay, so we have about 31 spinal nerves. Now, the first is the beginning portion. It is called the cervical nerve. Okay, and it is there are 8 in number, and it's always termed C1 to C8. That's the first segment. And the second segment of the spinal cord is the thoracic nerve. The thoracic nerve. And there are 12 in number. There are 12 in number, so we name them T1 to T12. Okay? The next one that follows is the lumbar nerves. And they are 5 in number. So you have L1 to L5. Okay? So after the lumbar, you have the sacral, nerve, and they're also 5 in number, from S1 to S5. All right, and finally you have the coccygeal, nerve, and it is just one, so it is oftentimes termed CX1. Okay, so these are the different segments of the spinal cord. Now, let's take a transverse section of the spinal cord and see what exactly happens in the spinal cord. Now, taking a transverse section, that means we have to divide, make a cut through, and look at it anteriorly. Okay, and that is the diagram you can see here. Now, this diagram now represents the transverse section of the spinal cord. This part drawn in red is the gray matter, and this other part is known as the white matter. Now, the differences between these two parts is that when a nerve cell has to communicate with another nerve cell, that is done in this portion of the gray matter. Okay, but when signals need to travel from the brain to other part of the body and from other part of the body to the brain through the spinal cord, it travels through the white matter. Okay, so that is that. Another thing you should note is that you see this entrance here. The sensory nerves will always go through the back of the spinal cord. So let's say this is the sensory nerve entering. Okay, so when the sensory nerve enter, it always goes through the back. Okay, and enters this part, the gray matter. Now, that is that because it is entering. Now, this motor information, right? The motor information will always leave, since it will always leave the spinal cord, it goes the opposite direction of the sensory nerves. So it goes, the information goes this way, out. Okay, so it goes from the front. So this is the front and this is the back. The sensory nerve always enters from the back. Meanwhile, motor information always comes out from the front. Okay, so that is that. Now, another thing you should also note here is that these white matters are called highways. In fact, they are like highway of vehicles, or you can say railways. They are just passage passage for information. All right. Now we have different parts because when sensory information gets into this part and enters here, it has to jump into the highway to be taken to the brain. Okay. For sensory informations like pain, touch, sensations, this is the route it follows. It follows the back, gets into here, and jumps into the highway and is taken to the brain. And so we have about 4 parts of the highways. We have one here, we have another here, we have another one here, and here. Okay, so sensory information, when it enters the spinal cord, it jumps into these portions of the white matter. And when it jumps into this portion of the white matter, it is taken directly to the brain. All right. Now, looking at the motor informations now. Now, the motor information is going back from the brain to other parts of the body. So you have them here and here. So these are the highways for motor information. You have another here and here. So we have the highways for motor information and the highways for sensory information. All right. So basically, an overview: the the sensory information gets through the through into the spinal cord through the back, right? Gets to the back, gets into the white matter, gray matter, and jumps into the highway and is taken to the brain. Okay, but the motor information, the information moves and enters the highway from the brain through the highway, jumps into this part and moves out since the motor information is coming out of the body. So this is just a quick overview of the spinal cord. Thank you and see you in my next video.